Hi friends, welcome to the NPTEL course Strategy and Technology, a practical primer. We are starting week 3 of our lectures. This focuses on strategy execution. In this lecture, 11th in the series, we will talk about execution overview. Strategic management is a vast field. However, there is nothing like a good strategy or a bad strategy. We have several concepts, theories, frameworks, and models that can be deployed to formulate our strategy. However, we need to deploy those models also to execute and accomplish the desired outcomes. Just to recapture whatever we have discussed, we discussed about external analysis, we discussed internal analysis, we understood how formulation of strategy can take place, and now we are going to analyze how strategy execution takes place. There are other aspects of strategy which are very specific goal-linked strategies: expansion of companies, integration across the value chain, diversification of businesses, and restructuring of business, entirely detailed domains of strategy. The vehicles which we use to deploy our strategy and accomplish our outcomes are also different. We can have collaboration, we can have alliance, we can have joint venture, we can have merger and acquisition between two parties, the firm and the partner. But all of this has 4 objectives. 1, revenue increase, profit increase, market share increase, and market capitalization growth. This is the overall gamut of strategic management in terms of practices and outcomes. Strategy framework is an elaborate framework. When you look at this graphic, you will find that it is not a simple matter of forecasting. It is also not writing reams of paper on functional strategies and then binding them together as a strategy. Strategy framework is a very elaborate, comprehensive 360-degree framework that every company must adopt. It starts with environmental scanning, the external environment as well as the internal environment of the firm. In the external environment, we have nature, because climate conditions are extremely important and they are impinging on how we formulate and execute our goals. The societal expectations, the economic conditions, and the industrial structure. Within the internal framework, we have values of the company, the culture that exists in the company, the structure of the organization, and the resources that can be deployed by the company. Once we do this scanning, we looked at SWOT analysis as a methodology of scanning. We come to strategy formulation. We have to determine the whole purpose of our organization, that is vision and mission. That is the very purpose or very reason for the existence of the corporation. Then we need to flow vision and mission to the hardcore objectives, that is the results which we need to accomplish. And based on the vision, mission, and objectives, we formulate our strategies, taking into account the external factors as well as the internal factors. Strategies are nothing but plans to achieve mission and objectives. Finally, we have policies. How do we ensure that the strategies are the right strategies? How do we ensure that the execution is as per the value systems, cultural ethos, structural realities, and resource deployment of a company? Once we do that, we get into strategy implementation. It comprises 3 blocks of activities. 1, the programs and tactics we have to implement a strategy, the budgets with which the strategies can be implemented, and the procedures that are required for seamless and smooth implementation of strategy. But our job doesn't end with execution of strategy. We have to make sure that the strategies have been laid out and executed in the manner the goals have been envisaged. For this, we require an evaluation and control block as well. And here we assess the performance, we assess the results. Depending on this analysis of results, we have a feedback loop going all the way to the strategy formulation start. This feedback learning can occur from any aspect of this framework. However, typically when you measure the results or when you measure the efforts, you understand how we need to do the corrections. Similarly, when you repeat our external and internal analysis, then also we will get feedback. So this feedback mechanism or feedback loop is a continuous process that occurs in the background, sensitizing the strategic planners and the CXOs that we need to alter the strategies either for greater aggression or for more conservatism. That's how the strategy framework occurs. Let's also keep in mind that even the best of strategies could slip. We can draw up a strategic framework which is very comprehensive, but the business rhythm itself can be compromised because some assumptions could be wrong or they could be miscarried in actual rollout of the strategies. There could be unanticipated behavior of key external and internal factors. Some of them could be macroeconomic, some of them geopolitical, and some could be related to the competitor actions. Let's plot business factors, resource factors on x-axis and unrelated diversification and unanticipated market dynamics on the other. Then we'll get how strategy could go wrong. One of the drivers of strategy is diversification. Many companies deploy strategy to diversify. But if this diversification happens in a manner that is not related to the core business, there is always some kind of extra pressure on the company as a system. So if business factors are volatile and you undertake unrelated diversification, you are abandoning in a way the core business instead of strengthening it. That is one aspect of strategy that could lead to some kind of slippage. Suppose resource factors are short and you also enter into unrelated diversification, then you will not be able to meet the diversification objectives with the appropriate talent and capabilities. There are many companies around us which have tried to diversify into related as well as unrelated areas, and they have not really succeeded because of this kind of unrelated diversification. It tests the leadership and management bench of the company. Let's say we have business factors which are not very conducive, but market dynamics are also not conducive. Then even if we have premium position, it falters. We have business factors, but they are subject to unanticipated market dynamics, in which case the premium position which we built on our business factors falters. The other one is where you have resource factors, but market dynamics are unanticipated. Then the regular business may go on, but management of innovation, which is futuristic resource deployment bets, they could break down. We have seen in an earlier lecture how every company would need to follow a 3-horizon strategy of improvement, differentiation, and finally innovation. And innovation usually emerges with the radical third horizon of getting into sunrise technologies or sunrise industries. So there are many ways in which the best of strategic firm can be tested, stressed in its opinion, in its growth, and in its results. So misfiring of the strategic framework should always be taken as a risk which we must plan for and which we must be guarded against. And factors are always not within our control. Some factors are within our control, but some factors are always beyond our control, internal or external. Even if you look at today's situation, 2021, companies have benefited from huge liquidity availability due to the quantitative easing adopted by different central banks. But suddenly in the month of December, we see a lot of outflows from the capital markets. We also see pressures on the market capitalization of the companies, and it is also evident that the liquidity is going to dry up progressively from now onwards. So it is a factor beyond the control of the industry and the constituent firms. So when we look at strategy implementation with this framework, we have to be understanding where we really figure and where we should really put our bets on. Once a meaningful strategy is developed by the company, we have to ensure that there is robust strategy implementation. Only through robust strategy implementation we can derive the best of the value from the strategy that is developed by us with a lot of care and passion. Now let's look at this paradigm in terms of 2 dimensions again. We may have a weak strategy, we may have a robust strategy. I believe that there is nothing like a good strategy or a bad strategy, but there could be a weak strategy, there could be a robust strategy. What is a weak strategy? A weak strategy is that is developed without any understanding of the resources that are required to execute the strategy. A strategy that is developed without proper analysis of the external and internal factors, a strategy where the formulation process itself is deficient. On the other hand, robust strategy is the opposite of that. Resources are put in place, strategy formulation is done in a very robust manner, and the external and internal analysis is carried out well. Now, juxtapose against this, we can have weak implementation and robust implementation. That is, the implementation vertical is not taken care of properly with appropriate programs, project management expertise, systems and processes to monitor. When this combination occurs, in each case, there would be some impact. Let's say we have a weak strategy of the firm and weak implementation. Those firms are set to decline and eventually exit the industry. On the other hand, we have robust strategy of a firm, but it is implemented in a weak manner, in which case the firms would lose the potential. A weak strategy can be made better in terms of robust implementation. In such a case, firms get an opportunity to live for another day, and hopefully during this process of living for another day, they would implement a better strategy. Then there are firms which have very strong strategy and very strong implementation. Such firms grow for perpetuity. Great firms, without doubt, are built by a robust end-to-end strategy and execution that is focused yet adaptive. Why do strategies fail? The implementation failures that drive strategic execution faltering are the following. 1. Implementation took more time than originally planned. That is, we thought that we will do a project in 2 years, but it takes 4 years. Many pharmaceutical companies aim to construct a project within 1.5 to 2 years, have the dossiers filed within 6 months thereafter, and then get approval within another 6 months. If these timelines are unrealistic, given the kind of product they are trying to develop and manufacture, or if the facility doesn't meet the US FDA regulations, then the implementation may take even 6 years or 8 years. A company called Alembic Pharma is currently encountering such a situation. Significant investment has been made to produce complex generics through the R&D and manufacturing cycle to meet US FDA requirements, but the US FDA inspection has been pending due to COVID for 1 year, and thereafter when the inspection happened, the plant has been slapped with 483 observations, that is Form 483 observations, and then the commercialization cycle is yet to take place. So implementation took more time than originally planned in this case. Unanticipated major problems arose. When you implement an infrastructure project, it's quite possible that land acquisition, which is considered difficult generally, but could become more difficult. That is, the unanticipated major problems are arising. Activities are ineffectively coordinated. The more activities are there in the strategy, the more coordination we need to have, and have seamless baton passing whenever the activities are sequential. And we also require comprehensive simultaneous analysis and interlinking when the activities are multifaceted simultaneously. Competing activities and crisis took attention from implementation. We thought about business portfolios and product portfolios as drivers of growth. But these portfolios also require, as I said at that point of time, our time and resources for them to take off. If there are too many competing activities and crises, implementation of each could be jeopardized. Many times we try to achieve something much bigger through resources that we have without reskilling them, retooling them. So if the involved employees in a new strategy have insufficient capabilities to perform their jobs, then the strategies falter. Although the strategy is formulated at the top, it is the mid and lower level employees who are essential for appropriate execution of the strategy. If these lower level employees are not adequately trained in strategy implementation, there could be failure. Without doubt, uncontrollable external environmental factors do create problems. Departmental managers at times do not provide adequate leadership and direction. That's because there has been no ownership in the building of strategy. When strategy is taken up as an ivory tower exercise and imposed top down, very often the department managers and the rank and fail to own the strategy. Similarly, when it is not communicated appropriately, the strategy fails. Key implementation tasks and activities were poorly defined. What this means is that we need to have very clear metrics of what we are measuring as a strategic effort and as a strategic outcome. If these are not well defined, then you might see a faltering of the strategy. And ultimately, if all of this happens without any information system, then everything will be qualitative, everything will be judgmental, and there could be arguments as to what is right and what is wrong. Therefore, we must have a very solid information system. And when we talk about the solid information system, it could vary from the simple Gantt chart to complex data analytics framework. Another important aspect of strategy implementation is that we should anticipate the likely risks and failures and keep them monitored continuously. We should do whatever it takes to mitigate the risks and avoid failures, even though such a process may be infallible. Strategies typically comprise a string of offensive tactics. That is, a set of tactics which look like tactics in terms of opportunism. That is, there suddenly a market opportunity develops and you go to hammer and tongs to get that opportunity. This is the meaning of an offensive move. But actually it could be a string of strategic steps that are deployed by the company to gain advantage over competition. Full line competition, or what we call head-to-head competition. That is, a company introduces a new product, you also introduce a new product. If a company diversifies the product, you also try to diversify. If the company goes for cost cutting, you also do cost cutting. If the company appoints more dealers, you also appoint more leaders. That is head-to-head. Across the value chain, you are trying to compete. It is a form of being offensive against the company. That is one way of achieving market superiority or company superiority. The other could be segmental competition. You may say that this segment is extremely important for me or for the competition. Again, you go all the way to ensure that you are the leader in that segment. You put full force in vanquishing the competition in that segment. That is one way of doing it. Or you could build all your strengths in that segment. The third one is market switching. You take all the markets together and see which are the markets which are vulnerable to switching, which are not vulnerable to switching. Those markets which are vulnerable to switching can be persuaded to switch with little effort. But those markets which are tough to switch must be pursued. Aggressive actions must be implemented, be it aggressive product communication or promotional rollout or sales force engagement. And when that happens, then markets would switch. But this is an offensive tactic, because if you switch the market or the demand from the competitor also would try to do that. Therefore, the rivalry in the industry would go up. Finally, the ecosystem dominance and price warriorship are two of the other offensive tactics. Let us look at the ecosystem dominance. That means that you have preferred vendors, you have preferred channels, you have preferred logistics provider. That means people give first preference to you. And that could be for whatever reason, because you have done things collaboratively with the vendors, suppliers, channel partners and logistics providers, or you have given them preferential pricing, you have given them higher demand opportunity, whatever it is. There is a special relationship which makes you a dominant player of the ecosystem. That is an offensive way of conducting your business. And there could be price warriorship as well. That is, reduce your prices to capture the market share. However, a strategy that is based only on offensive tactics to reap high rewards entails high investment with high risks. So we have to be watchful of that. Strategy may also comprise a string of defensive tactics. That is, you raise structural barriers, you lower the inducement for attack, or increase the perceptions of retaliation. Strategy of a firm is not always about intense competition to secure a win over others. It is also a set of defensive activities that have been outlined. What are the structural barriers, the entry barriers, the exit barriers, the mobility barriers, the technological barriers? That is, you are seen as an innovator product company. If you are seen as a differentiated company, people would think twice before trying to attack you or getting into your industry. If you are seen as a low-cost manufacturer of high-quality products, you have raised a structural barrier for yourself. So that is a defensive tactic. You are not looking at the competition. You are only looking at yourself and making yourself all the time better. The other one is the lower inducement for attack. That is, you don't go to press every now and then saying that I am a market leader. You don't tell analysts that I am going to outsmart the competition all the time. You kind of work in a stealth mode or a calm and collected mode, in which case the competitors also would be not noticing you and they would not take offensive actions to destabilize the industry equilibrium. There is also another way, that is your ability to retaliate must be known. That could be proved in some cases, but that proof could be juxtaposed against the perception. That is, you may not actually invest in a significant manner as well, but you can tell the industry that, look, I am setting up this kind of facility. When you do that, then there would be perception of retaliation on the part of other players, and they would not easily take to retaliating. So the raising of structural barriers also will require investment, but certainly not to the same extent as offensive actions. And offensive actions may not always be investments for the future. They may be expenditures to spark some improvement in the market position. That is the difference between offensive actions and defensive actions. A good company follows a combination of both. Let's look at some structural barriers which companies have. There are several ways in which companies can raise structural barriers and strengthen their position against forays by competition. These can be raised only through clear strategies and execution. In case of Ashok Leyland, it has difficult to replicate product strengths. So these are the structural barriers for the company. Google creates patent estate proactively. It is a structural barrier which has been erected by the company consciously against people getting into the such activity, which is the core activity for the company. Maruti Suzuki erected structural barriers by owning and dominating channel access like no other car manufacturer. Tata tried to proactively integrate in terms of the manufacturing facilities, outsourcing facilities, and diversify in terms of the product range. That was a structural barrier that was erected very effectively by Tata Motors. Samsung builds brand equity through continuous advertisement, launch of several products which have high visibility. Hyundai ensured preferred supplier access. It brought several Korean companies instead of relying solely on indigenous as well as Suzuki related vendors. It brought its own Korean supplier vendors and provided supplier access. Apple, it ensures purchase stickiness. That is, if you are part of an Apple ecosystem, you would not move out of that ecosystem because you are tuned to stay in that and benefit from that ecosystem. And that's what Apple has done. And that happened because there was a combination of several factors: design elegance, manufacturing perfection, brand equity, consumer experience, and so on. Purchase stickiness just doesn't come as an objective. It has to come as an experience that is proven. Nissan, Renault, they have tried to co-own and co-share facilities, as you can see in Chennai itself, where the cars are different in terms of the badging, but the production is undertaken in joint facilities. Renault and Nissan achieved structural barriers by carrying out this activity. Kalyani Group, it increased scale and scope economics. Could be a forging manufacturers, but they expanded their global dominance into several categories, including defense supplies, into several classes of truck supplies, and that's how they increased their scale and scope. DuPont is another company which has got world-class standards and industry-leading standards in environment, health and safety, as well as in environmental empathy, social responsibility and corporate governance. And that is hard to imitate. That is how the structural barriers are established. Raising the structural barriers, including entry mobility barriers, is the most defensive play for a firm. And those must be done carefully and with considerable thought. Every strategy requires resources to execute. Obviously, capital and people are the most obvious resources, but the entire gamut of strategic management itself constitutes a significant resource. How we think of strategic management in our company, how we execute our strategic management process is a significant asset. It is a significant competency. Strategic plan has two aspects: business plan and functional plans. Now, these business plans and functional plans lead to investment plans, annual budgets, and functional budgets. All of these things are interconnected. The ability to synchronize in a seamless way all of these plans is a talent that resides in certain companies. That's why they plan well, they execute well, and they achieve results well. Depending upon the nature of the firm, the time horizons, and the multiplicity of actions that are taken, the plans and budgets also vary. So it is a complex task, but it should be made simple for the organization to appreciate and execute. Now, once you have the resources, they have to be deployed. How do we deploy a resource? Budget is the common methodology for deploying resource. So that projects are defined, activities are defined, you know how much is the resource allocation, and you monitor how the spend is. But there is also another way of looking at deployment of resources. And when we say resources, it is not only capital, it also is including people time and also management attention. We can have standard operating procedures as one way of ensuring that this deployment happens in the right way. That is, if you have a checker verifier mechanism in approving the financial transactions, or if you have a trust and verify methodology in certain other financial transactions, if you have certain sequence of operations when you do big projects, if you have simultaneous operations which must be self-coordinated, these are all standard operating procedures. The other one is stage gate management. That is, a project will move to the next step only when a particular stage gate is crossed. In drug discovery, that stage gate management is very effectively deployed. That is, a compound is taken up for chemistry synthesis only when it is proved in silico models that yes, it can be developed. You can do chemistry even if the in silico model is not proved. That is a technical judgment, that is an experiential judgment, but that is part of the stage gate that makes people come around to one table and then discuss whether this compound is worth taking up for the synthesis portion. Once the synthesis is done, you pass it through in vitro animal models. That is, you take cells of the animals or the human DNA and see whether this product is impacting. For example, when people are thinking about doing Omicron related vaccine, first they are assessing whether the existing vaccines will work against that, and these are being done in laboratory trials. Based on these biological screens, we can determine what kind of modifications have to be done in the vaccine. This is the stage gating process. And after that, you have actual biology models in animals and clinical trials, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 in human beings. The entire set of stage gating could happen within overall project management framework. That is, you have a project management framework by which you understand the total set of activities that is involved in the project and take a holistic view. Every project is assigned a project manager and project leads, and they coordinate with scientists and directors executing the project so that administrative efficiency is ensured, top management reporting link is ensured. So when you do deployment in this manner, you will have efficiency, you will have effectiveness, and you will have competitiveness. The design of organization structures and process as well as talent placement must support the above. There is also conglomerate synergy. That is, conglomerate is a group of companies within the same ownership or shared ownership which conduct similar process across the conglomerate, but they have different business verticals, different product verticals, and that leads to synergy. Shared augmented know-how. Because you have one common corporate center, it is possible to understand how each company is performing and then pass on that know-how to other company. Then you can have coordinated strategies. You can optimize or share resources. You can economize on the scale and scope, pooled negotiating power, new business creation, and so on. Several groups, be it Tata Group, Aditya Birla Group, Hinduja Group, Reliance, TVS, they are all having the capability to drive synergy through the very many business activities that exist in their conglomerate umbrella. However, the way we structure the organizations and the way we get them together to brainstorm, as well as talent placement across the group companies, are essential to support the above conglomerate strategy. Let's take an example of Tata Strategy. Tata Group is the largest conglomerate in India. It has committed over 70,000 crore, that is $10 billion, to deleverage and restructure. Tata companies consolidate cross-holdings, acquire strategic assets, and infuse much needed capital for future growth in this process. At the same time, the group's collective market capitalization crossed rupees 18 trillion, which is $240 billion by March 2021. The profile of Tata Group is as follows: 700,000 plus employees around the world, 40 companies with Tata name, 25 associate companies, and 11 educational institutions. And these companies are organized under 10 business clusters. They also have a 3S strategy, which is driving this development: simplify, synergize, and scale. Under this strategy of 3S, what Tata Group has done in recent years is that it has unified entities in some clusters like aerospace and defense. These businesses were being conducted in 4-5 companies. All of that was brought under one company called Tata Aerospace and Defense. Then reduction of subsidiaries in others. And third, exiting non-core businesses for focus and agility. It has also done synergization of the entities. In some clusters such as automobiles, chemicals, power and finance, they have done cross-holding transfers of products so that the industry benefits the company. That is, focus on the industry vertical helps the company focus in terms of business strategy and execution. This happened between Tata Chemicals and Tata Consumer Products. Tata Chemicals had several consumer brands. Those were given to Tata Consumer Products, and Tata Chemicals has been taken up for greater synergy with the automobile division to develop electric batteries and materials that are required for electric batteries. And scale. All Tata Group companies are strategized to grow and scale up with emphasis on consumer, retail, financial and digital services. A company such as Tata Telecommunications, which was nothing but VSNL at one point of time, has grown substantially with new technologies to straddle the hardware and the software of telecommunication infrastructure. More information can be got from Tata Group newsroom. Under this one Tata vision and 3S strategy, companies within these 10 business clusters are evolving in ways that make sense to each industrial segment and each particular organization. So it is getting the benefit of product specialization, business specialization, but at the same time, the benefit of business diversification and corporate diversification. But a conglomerate has got great responsibility to do this very effectively. For this, strategic management process across the conglomerate is very much required. We also need to think of structure strategy linkage. How does it happen? Does structure follow strategy or strategy follows structure? There has been a seminal study by Alfred Chandler which talked about strategy and structure as chapters in the history of the industrial enterprise. What he has outlined is that first a company creates a new strategy. When a new strategy is created, new administrative problems emerge. That is, you suddenly want to do electric vehicles. But how do I do electric vehicles when I don't have suppliers? How do I do it when employees are not available, when the locations are not having capacity? So when these administrative problems emerge, but the new strategy is taken upon itself, the company faces economic performance decline. Then you create an appropriate structure to ensure that the strategy is effectively implemented, and then economic performance rises. Many companies, in their enthusiasm to plan and execute new strategies, they do not take care of establishing an appropriate structure. So the thesis is that structure follows strategy, but it must closely be aligned to the strategy. Research also supports Chandler's proposition that structure follows strategy. But we must also have the reverse proposition that structure, that is the talent that is resident in a company, that could also influence strategy. It is viable in certain cases. If you've got people who have got great talent, who have got the ability to create new technologies and new products, why not? Structure can follow strategy in such companies. Organizational lifestyle. Like products have their life cycle, businesses have their life cycle, organizations also have life cycles. It's not that a particular type of organization structure and particular type of organizational resourcing would stay on with the same effectiveness over a period of time. There is a genesis for the organizational life cycle, there is a growth phase, there is a plateau phase, and what next. If you don't do this what next properly, you will get into insolvency and bankruptcy. Many of the insolvency and bankruptcy cases are not because of poor product planning or poor product execution, but they are because of the poor organization that didn't take forward the product plans appropriately, or they didn't establish the real linkages, proper linkages between products and markets. So what next is important? Should we absorb new technologies, new process, new talent? Should we reinvent our products? Should we restructure our businesses, or should we face decline? These are the questions that an organization faces time to time, and organizational life cycle follows this, and it is possible to regenerate the business, the product lineup, and also the organization. In many times, rejuvenation of the organization has to precede the rejuvenation of the business. We have seen in the case of Enfield turnaround that a new leadership and a new way of looking at the business has helped Enfield to come up trumps in the 350cc and higher end motorcycle segment. So strategic performance determines the shape and sustainability of the organizational life cycle of a firm. So the organization cannot let strategic performance decline, and whatever is required for organization to manage this must be taken up. There is also a concept of reengineering. It is a very important concept. The reengineering concept is propounded by Michael Hammer. It is nothing but the radical redesign of business process to achieve major improvements in cost, service, or time. It is not a structure, it is a process. It is an effective program to implement strategic change. Let me consider some aspects of reengineering. First, you should organize around outcomes, not tasks. That is, you should have a project mentality in the organization. It is not that I do separation of good data and bad data. That is a task. But you should understand why you are separating the good data and bad data, and how you are going to utilize the good data for efficient process as well as efficient outcome. So when you have that outcome in mind, this separation will be done meaningfully, and the communication also will get done meaningfully. So design a person's or a department's job around an objective or outcome instead of just a task or a series of tasks. Secondly, output users to be process performers. That is, process can be re-engineered so that people who need the result of the process can do it themselves. One classic example is production people owning quality control. People who do the production are expected to give high quality products time over again. But if quality control exists as a separate department, it's quite possible that the production focuses only on turnover and quality focuses only on checking and accepting or rejecting. On the other hand, if at least the quality control aspect of the quality function is given to the producers of products, then there will be better ownership and better discipline in how the production process is being taken care of. From information processing work to real work, people or departments that produce information can also process it for use instead of just sending raw data to others in the organization to interpret. One of the profound examples of this has happened in 1970s when Tata Motors, that is at that point of time Telco, designed its semi-forward call vehicle. It was a huge effort across the organization, having all the departments producing data on the new vehicle's performance, but also collecting the data, analyzing, and together understanding how this new product is performing. That resulted in the SFC model, semi-forward call model, becoming the trendsetter in Tata Group's indigenization efforts. Another way to look at it is to integrate geographically dispersed resources. As part of globalization, several of the R&D and manufacturing centers are dispersed across the globe. However, we need to integrate them. Given the digital connectivity that now exists and also the modern information systems, companies can provide flexible service locally while keeping the actual resources in a centralized location for coordination purposes, which means that you can have a central design studio, but the product development departments can be in many countries. and that could be digitally communicated with each other. Road conditions could be simulated, and the central studio can come up with suggestions by which product development can be region specific. The other one is linking parallel activities rather than results. That is, when separate units perform different activities. A case such as Airbus, where wing is done by one company, engine is done by another company, both in two different locations, and interiors are done by others, sensors are done from some other country. It is important that all these parallel activities are synchronized, and while separate units do perform legally, they must eventually come together and communicate amongst themselves the best way to execute. And Gemba, that is the decision point, needs to be where the work is performed. The people who do the work must make the decisions and be self-controlling. It is inefficient and ineffective to get a problem defined through paperwork which is analyzed elsewhere and then solution forwarded back to the workplace. It is always appropriate that the industrial engineers, the planners, the task managers, the doers who actually do the work get together at the workplace and then improve the decision making. Japan's famous Kaizen system gained from this. That is, do things at the workplace. That's why you have Gemba Kaizen. The other aspect of reengineering is capture information once and at the source. Instead of trying to have multiple databases, you find out what is the source for each peculiar or unique type of information and then put it on the network. Again, it happens in a design system. The design of a bolt could be similar across different models, but unless it is accessible to every design center across the world, there would be repetitive understanding of vendor development, repetitive execution of new vendor relationships, and finally suboptimal costs. So the database must be universally applicable within a company for the company to be effective. So these are the principles, 7 principles of reengineering, which organizations could keep in mind while aiming for strategic excellence. Then we must also have organization structures that drive our specific objectives. If you want to go international, you must have an international organization structure which is synchronous with the kind of plans you have for globalization. Asian Paints, one of the leading paint companies in India, grew substantially not only domestically but also internationally. Between 1945 and 2020 is the growth of this company. And it has also acquired companies during this process, and there is a group company concept in the company. Global companies typically would have multiple stages of development. Not all companies that carry out international businesses are global multinational corporations, but most global companies have evolved over a period of time. In stage 1, typically a company is a domestic company. In stage 2, it will be a domestic company with export division. Stage 3, primarily domestic company with international division. See the difference between export division and international division as terminology. Stage 4 will be multinational corporation with multi-domestic emphasis. And finally, we have the transnational or truly global company, multinational corporation with global emphasis and networking. And that ensures one international presence across the world. Given this, we also have reasons why structures lag and not just follow strategies. Changes to organizational structures are far more difficult to accomplish than formulation of new strategies. We can put in execution a new strategy, but changing the structure to meet the strategy is challenging. People seek to execute new strategies with existing deficient structures unless pushed. Whenever you give a new target, people tend to say that, yes sir, we can do it with the existing resources. We don't need to add people. We don't need to change our structure. People may agree to add people, but they will never agree to change the structure. That is the way that department is organized. What are the reasons for this kind of resistance to change? 1, there is a lot of comfort with known structures and processes in individuals. And how do we overcome that? We should demonstrate the importance of new structures and processes in driving new strategy. People are comfortable with the relationships that have been established over years and in some companies over decades. Therefore, there is comfort with known colleagues and comrades. How do we mitigate that? we should make people well known to each other across the organization. We should facilitate interpersonal networking across the company proactively. There is also a negative factor. There is a lot of vested interest in organizations in silo functioning. That is, I do my bit. I don't bother what happens next. To be able to mitigate this risk, we should move people out of the zones of false comfort, and we should do that by focusing on total outcomes. Silo functioning also is egoistic. Some people feel that their work is superior to other people's work, in which case transparency, holding the mirror to such silos and such people is also important to move people out of their artificial zones of comfort. Resistance to change also is governed by people failing to see the big picture. They have excessive obsession with microtasking. Therefore, they do not look at what's happening over the big canvas. To obviate this, we have to make strategy formulation a shared exercise. This is one theme that comes up through this strategy lecture, that strategy is not one person's job. It is the organization's job. But organization has different jobs to do depending upon different functions and different people. But they all must be inclusively participating in the strategy formulation exercise. That then only the right inputs will come, right internal and external analysis would come, and right ownership for the strategy would come. There is another reason for resistance. Resistance to entry of new talent that new structures entail. New structures are always established for new products. It's not just somebody is happy to keep changing structure. New structures generally are based on new products and new businesses, and that requires new talent to enter. If a pharmaceutical company wants to do biosimilars or biologic products, obviously it has to create a new divisional structure and take people from companies which have done those kinds of activities, and there will be resistance. I have personally experienced resistance when a bulk drug manufacturer wants to extend itself into formulations manufacture, entirely different type of technology and entirely different type of people competencies, and the bulk drug company part of it tries to overshadow the formulations part of the company. Our job is to ensure that the new talent is incubated well and they demonstrate their capability, and there is a proper organization structure to do that. For this, we have to demonstrate the need for new skills and competencies to the existing people as well. One of the resistance factors to change is lack of role modeling at the top. We should have senior leadership that is role modeling. The tone at the top should be nice, should be engaging, and should be effective as well. Once that is done, it is possible to mitigate the risk of weak leadership. Then new structures lead to new problems. We have to have the ability to cope with the teething problems of new structures. Many times incubators are destabilized far too soon, saying that it is not giving the right results. We have to keep taking the right results from the incubators and keep growing them further. We have to align on the sustainable positives without getting bogged down with the negatives that are anyway inescapable in the initial phases. So the reasons for resistance to change in organizations, particularly when structural transformations and strategic transformations are taking place, are many. But fortunately, we have countermeasures for each of the factors of resistance which we can implement as I have outlined here. So all of this points to good organization design being at the core of strategy execution. Good organizational design will help a firm execute its strategies based on good strategic planning. It does many things. It proactively prepares the company and the organization for strategic options, comprehensive understanding of what can take place, because the design is such that there is a lot of interaction and a lot of data collection, data assimilation, and data review. A seamless organization economizes on bureaucratic costs. It enhances a value chain competency across the board. The company's value chain will be more effective, more impactful if the organizational design is good. The economies on bureaucratic costs obviously lead to a low-cost structure and the ability to choose a low-price option if it is required. The value chain enhancement or value chain improvement leads to a differentiated position which can be used productively in the organization. So you can see two generic strategies being rolled out because of good organizational design. One, cost leadership. Two, differentiation, because the structure has been designed to accomplish both of these factors. And when these two are combined, it leads to competitive advantage, profitability, and superior return on investment. That is the way a good organization design leads to sustainable competitive advantage for a firm. Corporate culture is an extremely important aspect of organizational development, strategic planning, and strategic execution. What is culture? Culture is something which we feel when we enter an organization. The way people greet, the way people meet, the way people give their requirements, the way people analyze your requirements and then create a win-win situation. It is a positive culture. So corporate or organizational culture is the specific set of behaviors, practices, and systems that are driven by the values adopted by people and teams in the organization. I'll give you an example of Tata Group. Ratan Tata famously said in 2006, "Business, as I have seen it, places one great demand on you. It needs you to self-impose a framework of ethics, values, fairness, and objectivity on yourself at all times." And this is the Tata Group ethic of doing things right, doing things with quality and purpose, and above all, acting as a trustee of public wealth has enabled significant customer trust in Tata Group. In fact, when Tata Group takes over Air India, there is all-round support that this is the right thing that has happened. That is the accumulated goodwill that Tata Group enjoys, and it hasn't come through advertising. It has come through having a system of values, ethics, and culture in the organization. In fact, I have personal examples. When I do my books, I do send to industry leaders for their reading at their convenience as well as their feedback. Always the Tata Group leaders, be it N. Chandrasekaran, the current chairman, or even Ratan Tata, who is the chairman emeritus with so many responsibilities and occupying thoughts, these leaders send back a response to me saying that we have gone through your book, we like it, we are going to take some points out of that. That's the culture. Whereas there could be other groups which are very successful, but they do not provide this level of cultural superiority, what you can feel when leaders come to the people at large and connect with the people at large. So the 5 core values of Tata Group are as follows: integrity, responsibility, excellence, pioneering, and unity. These are higher order values which drive a company to be superior, not only in terms of competitive advantage, but also in terms of environmental empathy, social responsibility, and corporate governance. So the linkage of strategy and culture is very important for us. Culture influences the strategy of a firm. Equally, any strategy should have the backing of the company. And at times when the strategy is of a different nature, the company needs to change its culture. For example, a highly domestic-oriented company which is trying to export its products in a big way and later become truly international must keep changing its culture. Senior leaders must synchronize strategy and culture transformations. There are some important aspects of corporate cultural development. The first is the tone at the top. That is, leaders must not only create value statements but also exemplify their practice. That is, they should walk the talk, as we say. Second, there should be clear expectations. Expected behaviors must be clear with reinforcing, reward, and counseling mechanisms. And third, embedded systems. Systems and processes that are culturally aligned and owned across the organization. We cannot talk about empowerment as a cultural facet, but through the processes request and require that every decision must be vetted by 2 levels above. Then obviously the culture is saying something in writing but practicing something in reality. That is a cultural conflict which will inevitably end with the poor culture taking a grip of the organization. Therefore, tone at the top, clear expectations that are set across the organization, and the embedded practices that are rolled into the systems and processes are important for defining the culture of an organization. And a great culture always leads to a great strategy. There tend to be cultural conflicts and alignments too. As I said, culture enables strategy. For example, a culture of innovation drives cutting-edge product and business development. A culture of being risk-averse makes companies be safe in their product development and plumb for an incremental improvement route. So culture is a great determinant of strategy. But at the same time, strategy leads to conflicts of culture because of the strategic decisions that firm may take. Strategic alliance with cross-ownership is one such case. I mentioned the example of Renault-Nissan strategic alliance, which has provided certain advantages, but there was a cultural adjustment of dependent independence on an overall global scale. We are all aware of the problems that happened between Renault and Nissan in terms of readjustment of mutual strengths and requirements. Then strategic organic integration, diversification. Induction of new talent is bound to lead to cultural conflicts. At times the culture would be superior, at times the culture that is coming in could be inferior. So this is an experience which is continuously encountered by companies because companies need to grow based on new strategies and new structures. Management of this cultural conflict and achieving alignment is one of the very important tasks of Chief Human Resources Officer and Chief Executive Officer, as well as the other CXOs. Then strategic merger. Companies grow by merging themselves with other companies. If you have merger of equals, it could lead to significant conflicts. Therefore, success depends in those cases on development of fused culture, integrated culture. The fourth is strategic acquisition. In this case, the acquirer tends to be the dominant organization because the resources are there with the acquirer, and the acquired organization is expected to fold into the acquiring organization. This cultural dominance, which comes up with better resource demonstration, could lead to conflicts. One of the reasons for several mergers and acquisitions failing in terms of value creation could be related to the cultural conflicts and alignments that are missing in an appropriate way. So how do we evaluate and control strategy? We have seen several aspects of strategic execution, right from designing as per a proper framework, doing strategic planning the right way, having the right inputs, creating an execution paradigm, understanding the structure strategy relationships, culture strategy relationships, reengineering for efficiency, and so on. But how do we evaluate and control strategy? It is more challenging than that of ongoing functional or business performance. As far as every function is concerned, there are set methods of operation and set metrics. But when you look at strategic management and strategic formulation and execution, it's very difficult to set such management control systems and processes. For that, we have four layered approach. One, managed by strategic objectives. That is, you look at progress towards vision mission related strategic objectives. That is, if the vision or the mission is to become global top 5 in the chosen product market segment, that should be the overarching objective which is visible to everybody. That's the strategic objective. Whatever the functional objectives are, they all must be linked to the strategic objective. That is the passion that should drive the organization. Second, management by strategic projects. To be able to achieve those strategic objectives, typically we need 3 or 5 strategic projects which will make the transformation in strategy feasible. Therefore, you should kind of disseminate the strategic planning process in terms of strategic project formulation, which can be felt by different companies. If you are looking at an electrification project, one strategic project is to develop the electric battery power pack. Another strategic project is to develop a new vendor network which will meet the electric vehicle requirements. Another strategic project is to create capacity for new assembly lines. Another strategic project is to negotiate with the external ecosystem, be it the power plants or the oil companies, for the charging infrastructure. Similarly, when you develop a vaccine using new technology at warp speed, it has been a strategic project for Moderna, and there must be a strategic project approach to drive execution. Then we logically come to management by execution efforts. That is, we have to program manage the strategic plan in terms of execution. To do that, you have to metricize as much as possible the overall and functional plans. If minus 75 degrees storage requirements are there for distribution of the mRNA vaccine, that is the Pfizer-BioNTech mRNA vaccine, it cannot be taken up at the end of the vaccine development plan. Some risk has to be taken in advance, and the distribution mechanism must be set in place right from the design of the cold boxes to the logistics provider who would distribute, and the entire demand plan as well as the vaccine distribution plan globally. That requires a lot of execution, project management. And finally, manage by strategic value. That is how the street is looking at your strategic transformation. Street always comments or disowns a company based on its perception of the future transformation of the company. So you focus on how the street perceives the strategic transformation. And projects that develop electric vehicles, projects that undertake transformation in energy scenario, projects that have new construction technologies, all of these things are transformative projects. And the strategic value that is created in the national economic space, in the national industrial space, and the global impact are the strategic value parameters that can be assessed. So with this, we come to the end of this session, the 11th in this series on strategy and technology. Thank you.